We need to convey an incident which indicates that there is a certain group effort to make the KPK investigation directorate to build tyranny. We found some evidence. At the end of 2018, a meeting was held by a group of certain employees. The meeting, led by Harun al-Rashid, conveyed the message that if later investigating colleagues have shifted to the ninth floor investigation directorate, to be brave to speak out to balance the police investigators' sources. On Friday morning, March 1, 2019, a meeting was initiated by Wada Pegawai. The meeting discussed 7 important points. That the transfer of the investigator to the investigator was political to eliminate the dependence of the police investigator. Whereas the employee's office is trying to stem the entry of investigators from the national police to become head of police/members. The employee center is trying to get more internal investigators, so there are only a few police investigators who will enter later. Whereas the employees feel there is resistance from some investigators who will become investigators. The employee container is taking advantage of the momentum where the leader approves the mechanism of transfer of investigators to investigators without testing, even though the deputy for enforcement is not included in the recruitment plan. Employees are afraid that if many do not approve the mechanism of transfer of investigators to investigators without testing and whispered to the leadership, the transfer mechanism will be cancelled so that the investigation directorate will be filled in by investigators from the national police source. Employees hope that internal investigators will enter first, then investigators from the national police source, so that the needs of investigators can be met internally without investigators from the national police. 3. On Friday afternoon, March 1, 2019, at the request and encouragement of the Employee Council, a leadership meeting with the Secretary General was conducted, which essentially resulted in an agreement that education of investigators who will become investigators will be conducted on March 11, 2019. 4. Still on Friday, March 1, 2019, several police investigator sources were facing the leadership, who was later met by Mr. Alexander Marwata. In essence, it was conveyed to Mr. Alexander Marwata that the transfer of investigators to investigators was very strongly suspected of the existence of the interests of individual internal employees to reduce the number of investigators from the national police. For the submission, Mr. Alexander Marwata said that there will be a leadership meeting on March 11, 2019 to discuss the matter because at that time the leadership was incomplete. Some of them were taking leave. 5. The leadership meeting that was promised on March 11, 2019 turned out the facts were never carried out. Even in the morning on March 11, 2019, the opening of education investigators to be investigators without tests were still carried out, and the leaders attended the opening ceremony of the investigators' educational activities. 6. At the time of the presentation of the material attended by one of the KPK leaders, Leo Demsirif, he stated that the aim of moving the 24 investigators to investigation was the first step so that there would no longer be investigators from the national police in the investigation directorate. 7. On April 23, 2019, it is planned to carry out the appointment and oath of 22 investigators as investigators from the original 24 people. The mechanism of transfer of investigators to investigators without testing is not in accordance with KPK Leadership Regulation Number 1 of 2019 concerning career arrangement at the Corruption Eradication Commission. It was not right when the transfer of investigators to investigators without tests was then interpreted as rotation because the investigators did come from the same deputy, namely the deputy for enforcement, but had different functions. From the series of facts of the incident as mentioned above, it is clearly illustrated that there are interests of some individuals acting in the name of the employee container WP who are supported by individual KPK leaders to make the Directorate of Investigation homogeneous. One source of investigators comes from internally in ways that disobeying legal disability. So, with the interests of some officers acting on behalf of the KPK Employee Center supported by KPK leaders to turn the Directorate of Investigation into homogeneous, one source of investigators comes from the internal. It is certainly contradictory with the spirit of the establishment of the KPK institution. Efforts to homogenize KPK employees, especially in the Directorate of Investigation, are visible and structured. It can be imagined that if the homogenization effort really happened, then the tyranny of law enforcers would be built, which had extraordinary authority because there were no more checks and balances. And an extraordinary impact will occur where, when the tyranny of law enforcers really exists, it is very likely that the KPK will be used and utilized by a group of elites for various interests, including political interests. In addition, on the other hand, the impact that will occur is injustice. Investigators who are shifted to the Directorate of Investigation without testing at least come from the position of young intermediate. The investigator after moving to the Directorate of Investigation at a minimum in the position of young middle. While the National Police investigator who has served in the KPK for 3 years as an investigator is still in the position of young beginner. Automatically, the investigator who shifts to the Directorate of Investigation without the test will be in a position of the higher level of office than the National Police investigator who was 3 years earlier to become a KPK investigator. Another analogy that can be conveyed is that PORI investigators who enter the KPK are members of the National Police who have had experience as little investigators lack of 5 to 6 years, while investigators who have shifted to the Directorate of Investigation without these tests have no experience at all as investigators. This shows the existence of treatment discrimination against fellow KPK investigators between internal sources of investigators and police investigators. Try to imagine if the investigation was carried out by investigators who were appointed with legal defect. Would the legal product in the investigation process be valid by the law? The purpose and reason for establishing the KPK is to inflame the spirit of anti-corruption. The establishment of KPK institutions with employees from various institutions and various disciplines aims to simplify and accelerate the process of eradicating corruption and checks and balances. We became very confident with the statement of Inspector General Aris Budiman, who had served as director of KPK investigation, which stated that there was a powerful figure in the KPK where the leader did not dare to act and was even affiliated with the group. In response to this, through this open letter, we hope and ask all elements of the unitary state of the Republic of Indonesia to be able to respond and take roles in accordance with their respective main tasks and functions to save and return the Corruption Eradication Commission KPK to its original purpose, its formation, so that efforts to form tyranny in the KPK can be prevented. Save KPK, save Indonesia.
We are anonymous, and we are awake. We do not forgive, and we do not forget. So, expect us.